Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch, and we will now reconvene and consider the final report on Plan 2008. In that regard, I just want to make mention, I don't know if everybody has received a copy of a letter that we received this morning from Senator Glenn Grothman, where the senator, as I understand it, I know the letter is there and I have not had time to read it, but he asks questions about what we're going to talk about this afternoon. I just wanted to acknowledge that we did get the letter. We didn't get it until 9-something this morning, but we did get it, and we'll be reviewing it and responding appropriately. With that, I would like to turn the discussion over to President Riley.
Thank you, President Bradley, and good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon, we will be turning our attention to another vital topic of concern to the UW system and the entire state. That is the need to make sure that all of our institutions and campuses are places where all are welcome and where all can succeed and thrive. In May 1998, this Board of Regents adopted the UW System's Plan 2008, Educational Quality through Racial and Ethnic Diversity. In the 12 months that followed, each of our UW System institutions developed its own institutional plan to implement the 7 strategic goals of the UW System Plan 2008. At the plan's midpoint in 2004, the board realized that the system was not achieving the degree of progress hoped for, and the board directed the UW system to reprioritize its efforts. Closing gaps in achievement, adopting a diversity report card to improve accountability, and implementing a system-wide diversity award were among the new features incorporated into Plan 2008 with this board's guidance in 2004. From the start, it was an ambitious undertaking. The plan was developed collaboratively from the bottom up, the way it should have been, through 110 different listening sessions held statewide with students, faculty, staff, community members, regents, legislators, Department of Public Instruction representatives, and others. We have now arrived at the end of the 10-year Plan 2008 effort, and we are taking stock of our accomplishments. I'm pleased that we have made some progress on our goals during the lifespan of Plan 2008. For instance, since 1998, enrollment of undergraduate students of color has risen from 11,967 to 18,021, an increase of 6,054 students, or a 51% expansion of students of color in our student body system-wide. They now represent 10.3% of all students, as compared with 7.7% of students in 1998. The gap in retention rates has narrowed. The retention rate for students of color has increased from 72% in 1998 to 75% at the end of 2007. The gap in retention rates between white students and students of color has been reduced from 7.2% to 4.7%, a gap that needs further closing, obviously. The gap in graduation rates has narrowed by 2 percentage points during the 10 years the plan was in effect, from 22% to 20%, another gap that clearly needs further closing. We have made progress in workforce diversity, too. Across the UW system, the number of employees of color has increased in every category, growing from 8.6% to 12.2% of the workforce. In 2008, there were 4,502 employees of color system-wide, a 64% increase from 10 years ago. We're moving in the right direction, and it's important that we continue in these efforts. The goals of the growth agenda and the UW system's diversity agenda are inextricably linked. As I've said repeatedly in the past, one cannot be accomplished without the other. Much work remains if we're to do that, if we're to succeed at that, and we recognize fully those challenges. Wisconsin's population, as we all know, is becoming increasingly diverse. We can succeed with the growth agenda if and only if we are much more successful in educating and graduating many more students from all backgrounds to ensure that they are well prepared to be engaged citizens who can contribute to and compete in the 21st century global society and marketplace. Our demography demands this determination. While we have made some progress toward our goals in Plan 2008, we have not moved fast or far enough. And we now have an ambitious new goal set for us by the new President of the United States. In his speech last week to a joint session of Congress, President Obama said, quote, "It is our responsibility as lawmakers and educators to make this system work, but it is the responsibility of every citizen to participate in it. And so tonight, I ask every American to commit to at least 1 year or more of higher education or career training. This can be community college or a four-year school, vocational training or an apprenticeship. But whatever the training may be, every American will need to get more than a high school diploma. And dropping out of high school is no longer an option. It's not just quitting on yourself, it's quitting on your country. And this country needs and values the talents of every American. This is why we will provide the support necessary for you to complete college and meet a new goal." And here's the President's new goal. "By 2020, America will once again have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world." That's basically 10 years from now, folks. And we've slipped in the last 10 years from being number 1 in the world to being number 10 now. That's an ambitious goal for the next 10 years, but it builds directly on the forward thrust of our growth agenda for Wisconsin. That's the end of the President's quote, by the way. "By 2020, America will once again have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world," unquote. We cannot meet this new goal established by the President without focusing relentlessly on what we did right and what we did wrong in Plan 2008, and using that learning as a platform for our follow-on initiative to Plan 2008, which we are calling Inclusive Excellence. I assure this board, I assure all the people of Wisconsin, I assure President Obama that we will have that focus and that we will use that learning. To tell us how we will do that, I'm pleased to turn the floor over now to my colleagues, Senior Vice President Rebecca Martin and Associate Vice President Vicki Washington. Rebecca.
Good afternoon. Before we begin, I would like to ask you to think about your own educational experiences, the opportunities that you had, and the barriers you might have faced. I know this is a bit out of the ordinary, but this is a different kind of Regents meeting, as President Regent Bradley pointed out this morning. And so, if you would indulge me, I would like to ask you all to stand, everyone in the room.
You hope that. Don't do touching.
And when I read a statement that applies to you, I would like you to sit down. Okay? Please sit down if you did not have the opportunity to go to college. Please sit down if the first language of one or both of your parents was a language other than English. Please sit down if at any point in your schooling, high school, college, graduate school, you felt uncomfortably excluded or singled out in the classroom or extracurricular campus activities because of your culture, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, class, gender, language, or disability. Please sit down if neither of your parents attended college. Please sit down if you needed financial aid to attend college. Okay. I would like you to notice who is standing and who has sat down. And I will mention, just to help those of you, that had I not been speaking, I would also still be standing. Now you need college education in this country is still a privilege, although one that is more and more of a necessity, both for individuals and for our country to be successful. I want to recognize those of you, the achievements of those of you who did sit down, what you had to overcome to reach the point where you are today. And I would mention that the barriers that you faced are just a few of those I might mention that face many of our students across our campuses and our institution. I would also like to recognize the lenses through which we view barriers to student success, which are often based on our own experience. So those of us who were privileged enough to be standing at the end of that exercise often look at the college experience through our own lens of experience and miss a lot about the barriers that others face. So today, we're going to present the key findings from the final report on Plan 2008. We're going to set the stage for a discussion which will begin today and continue on inclusive excellence, our next step as a system committed to creating the diverse learning environments we know are so vital to our students' learning, growth, and achievement. Before I do that, I would like to thank the people on the staff in Education, Diversity, and Inclusivity, OPAR, the Office of Planning and Budget, and Access, who worked so hard to bring you the report that was in your packets. I think that they did a wonderful job. I'd also like to acknowledge, as Kevin did earlier, the historic times we are now living in. We're in an unprecedented age of economic, political, and social uncertainty. There are lots of lessons waiting for us that will be waiting for us after the turbulence that we're experiencing now subside. But I'd like to also to call your attention to a lesson that, at least in my mind, we cannot wait on. It's an old lesson, really, one that is made new again by emerging circumstances. And that is that we are truly interconnected and interdependent as citizens of our world and as human beings. Those of us who work in the field of diversity know this lesson inside out. And we also know that what is in the best interest for some of us is in the end good for all of us. Where our students go, we will go, as a system, as institutions, and as a state. The presentation we're going to give to you this afternoon is divided into three parts. We're going to talk about key findings, conclusions, and recommendations from the final report of Plan 2008. We're going to talk about the intermediate steps we've taken in the UW system, focusing our efforts on closing the achievement gaps and setting the stage for inclusive excellence. And then the last section, and we're going to work really hard, despite the late start, to have plenty of time at the end for your discussion, for you to talk about policy issues. And we've posed three that were at the end of the executive summary in your board materials, and I'll come back to these at the end, but just so you can start thinking about them now as we go through this presentation, we would really appreciate your guidance on, from your perspective, what worked, what didn't, and what are the most important lessons you believe we've learned in this last 10-year plan. Secondly, where should the UW system expend its energy and resources in this arena? And third, what type of leadership is desired, required, and expected from chancellors, from the institutions, and from the UW system? But first, let me provide a bit of context. As President Riley said, success with the growth agenda hinges on our individual and collective success with the UW system diversity goals and therefore with inclusive excellence. We need to think about this with the backdrop of the changing demographics and the increasing diversity of our state's population. And just as one note, as Libby reminds us often, some of our largest school districts are, or soon will become, majority minority school districts. We have increasing numbers of K-12 students from families who qualify for free and reduced lunch and who qualify for need-based financial aid. In the growth agenda, we've committed to work that will help us to lever our human and financial resources, as you heard at our last meeting. And we are focused very much on greater success in educating and graduating a significantly greater share of high school students in the state from all backgrounds, whether that's diverse racial and ethnic and multicultural backgrounds, rural and urban, advantaged and disadvantaged. We've also expanded access and opportunity through a number of the initiatives that are listed there that we have talked to you about before. Here's the picture of what high school graduate projections look like for the state of Wisconsin. And high school graduates, as you know, are a very important demographic dynamic for the UW system. They're also an important indicator of the changing makeup of our communities across the state. And so if you look out over the next 10 years, what you see is the overall pool of high school graduates in Wisconsin will decline. At the same time, the pool of high school graduates for students of color will increase, particularly among Hispanic, Latino, and Asian students. The pool of high school graduates who are African American or American Indian remains relatively flat. And while this is not on the slide, I would note that the pool of white high school graduates during this period actually declines. So if we're going to make a difference, we've got to think about how we're going to be able to effectively serve this changing population of high school students. A little bit about the history of diversity efforts in the UW system. In 1998, we started our first of 2 10-year plans for diversity called Design for Diversity. We were the first system in the country to implement a system-wide strategic plan for diversity. In 1998, following Design for Diversity, we began the implementation of Plan 2008. And at the midpoint, in 2004, there was a very important Regent resolution that reaffirmed commitment to diversity, reprioritized and directed the system to focus its efforts on closing the achievement gap, instructed us to pursue the implementation of a diversity report card, and to institute a diversity award. And you will hear over the course of the entire afternoon, ending with the diversity awards, the steps we've taken to do these things. But I just wanted to point out that directive, that guidance that you gave us at that point, really did shift our focus. We would not be offering a diversity award today. We probably wouldn't have gone down the equity scorecard path if you hadn't provided us with that direction. And so I would encourage you to think again today about what things you'd like to pull out of this big picture and suggest that we focus on. So it's against this backdrop that we arrive at this point today and share with you the final results of Plan 2008 and the future directions for inclusive excellence. So I'd like to ask Associate Vice President Vicki Washington to give you this overview. She's going to be talking about both key findings and recommendations. Vicki?
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon. I was a little nervous about following our morning discussion, but I guess in some ways that it's really important that we have this discussion now. So you may recall that Plan 2008 had 7 goals, and these are pretty much posted in short, if you would, one-word summaries of what those goals are, and we will touch on some of the key findings in these areas. And we placed accountability at the top, even though in the sequencing it's number 7, largely because it's a thread throughout all of the goals that are there. So you may recall that one of our goals was to increase the pre-college pipeline so that ultimately we would be able to increase our enrollments of students of color. And you will see from this chart that a substantial number of multicultural and disadvantaged students have participated in pre-college programs across the UW system. Since 2003-04, the numbers of students enrolled in multicultural and disadvantaged pre-college programs has declined for all racial ethnic groups. The declines result largely from changes in the federal Gear Up funding at UW-Milwaukee, which had the largest number of students in these programs, and also with changes in the number of DPI scholarships that were awarded. The declines, on the one hand, can seem particularly stark when we think about the growth in the K-12 population that we are facing. And a detailed chart is in your report on page 19. This chart illustrates kind of what has happened with the pre-college pipeline since 1993. And this starts in 1993 because that's when OPAR began to track pre-college registrations through their database. So since 1993, over 80,000 students have participated in multicultural and disadvantaged pre-college programs across the UW system. Despite an improved registration system, we still lose track of some of the M&D students because we have to rely on Social Security numbers in order to track the student participants. And many of us are familiar with all the fears about identity theft and other things that we think really have a chilling effect on that, and right now that's the system that we have. Nonetheless, using the UW system pre-college database, we have been able to determine that between fall '93 and fall 2008, at least 7,637 pre-college students have enrolled someplace in the UW system as a new freshman. Almost every racial ethnic group covered by Plan 2008 represents a larger share in comparison with their representation at the outset of Plan 2008. The exception is with American Indian students, whose overall representation has not changed over time. It's around 0.7% of the entire UW student population. Southeast Asian and Latino Hispanic students experienced the greatest increases in enrollments among students in its underrepresented racial ethnic categories. Southeast Asian students almost doubled, increasing by 1,602 students overall. Latino Hispanic students increased by 1,371 students. African American students increased by 1,035, and American Indian students increased by 145 students over the 10-year period. There is a slight dip, if you notice on the graph, in Asian students, and we think, or we're not sure, but we think that might be the result of the time when we started to enable students to select 2 or more races. And that's when we noticed the change, but we're not positive about that. The second largest period of growth in enrollments for students, if you notice on the chart, occurred between 2003 and 2004, when the total number increased by 385 students. Since 1998, almost every racial ethnic group covered by Plan 2008 exhibited growth in their overall percentage of students who persist from the first year to the second year of college. We're closing the overall retention gap between students of color and white students, increasing from 72% in 1998 to 75% in 2008. Since 2004, Southeast Asians experienced the greatest increase in retention, an increase of 8 percentage points, followed by American Indian students, an increase of 6 percentage points, and then Latino Hispanic students increased by 3 percentage points, and African American students declined by 1%, as did white students. Overall, our graduation, 6-year graduation rates have increased slightly for students of color from 65 to 67%. Since the beginning of Plan 2008, Hispanic Latino student graduation rates increased the most in 2002, reaching 52%. For that same year, the African American graduation rates remained around 33%. And for all 4 underrepresented groups, they tended to be less than 50%. The graduation tended to be less than 50% system-wide. The number of bachelor's degrees conferred to students of color increased the most for Asians, increasing by 251 degrees since 1998. The number of degrees conferred to Latino, Hispanic, and American Indian students shows steady increases over the lifespan of the plan, and the number of degrees conferred to African American students increased between 1998 and 2004 and then declined slightly between 2004 and 2008. Goal 4 addresses the issue of financial need, and we wanted to give you a sense of the proportionate representation of students that have to really rely on financial aid for the UW system. And the thing I think that is most notable is that the numbers are going up. They're not declining. With respect to workforce diversity, the UW system workforce grew by 16%, or 5,089 employees, during the 10-year period that Plan 2008 was in effect. During that same period, the total number of employees of color increased from 2,744 employees to 4,502 employees, increasing from 8.6 to 12.2% of the workforce, an increase of 64%. Over the 10-year period that the plan was in effect, people of color were hired at an average rate of approximately 175 employees per year. Asian employees almost doubled during the 10-year period the plan was in effect, increasing from 3.7 to 6.6% of all employees. The numbers of Hispanic Latino employees also almost doubled, and African American employees increased by 215 during that 10-year period. American Indians showed no change in their proportionate representation of the total workforce. Across the UW system, employees of color increased in every employment category since 1998. African Americans, or blacks, Asians, and Hispanic Latinos showed real gains in the ranks of instructional academic staff, and Asians and Hispanic Latinos showed real gains amongst the faculty ranks. The numbers of Hispanic Latino classified staff almost doubled. So moving to Goal 7, which was the accountability goal, we wanted to highlight some of the things that we've implemented or we're doing to really seriously address accountability in the UW system. President Riley and the chancellors have developed particular performance indicators for each of their performance review processes in which they address issues relating to equity, diversity, and climate. In response to the board's directive, we implemented the equity scorecard, and today we have 11 campuses that are participating in the scorecard process and are using those findings to really help inform practice and determine interventions that will support student success. And we have also implemented in the accountability reports indicators measuring progress for diversity goals and closing gaps in achievement, and those will carry forward into the new accountability report. In addition, we've attempted to use disaggregated student data wherever possible so that we can really pinpoint where our students are not experiencing success. The major challenges that we see going forward, well, as you know from this morning's discussion, are fiscal, and we'd like to suggest that it's really incumbent upon us now to really do whatever we can to protect the modest gains that we've made over the 10-year periods. If we think about the history of the U.S., just following probably every period of Reconstruction, we've had retrenchment, and we'd like to avoid that at this time, and it particularly happens when we are in an economic decline. If we're going to be successful at this, we really need to implement better and more systematic assessment efforts so that we're looking at basically program impacts and not necessarily just measuring inputs, so that we understand the degree to which our programs are successful or not. With respect to accountability, what we'd like to suggest is that we probably need to do a better job of ensuring that diversity and equity and inclusion are represented in the institution's priorities at all levels, including their organizational plans and strategic plans, and to continue the good work that we started with the workforce diversity, focusing primarily on recruitment, retention, development, and climate issues, which would be borne out by the results of the climate studies that we've been doing. These are our recommendations for things that we really need to account for as we begin to develop plans and strategic actions for inclusive excellence. In spite of the progress that we've made, we've got quite a distance from the finish line. And we've learned a lot over the past 20 years, I think, that can inform our work going forward. These recommendations reflect our lessons and result in many respects from new and re-engineered strategies and practices that are required to support student success. We want to urge that we have much broader institution-wide engagement in this work. It's too much to have it borne on the shoulders of a few individuals or a few departments at our institutions. We also recognize that faculty are instrumental to this work and are really needed if we're going to support student success, and also look at issues like teaching and learning. That is the realm that they control. In addition, all members of the university communities can contribute and benefit. Faculty, staff, students, administrators, and institutional leadership in developing a shared vision, a collective understanding of what's needed, and a commitment to inclusion and excellence. And we have to find ways to align our accountability and reward systems, because those can be major motivators and catalysts for change. And last, to continue our work to achieve parity in the workforce, because that's the way in which we infuse diverse perspectives in everything that we do at our university institutions. So Rebecca is going to talk with you about some of our intermediate actions and then move into inclusive excellence.
Since the midpoint of the Plan 2008 and the Board's directive to reprioritize our efforts to close achievement gaps for our students, we've taken a number of steps, as Vicki outlined for you and you've heard before. We've done quite a bit of work with the equity scorecard, and we now have 11 of our institutions actively participating in that process, which is beginning to yield some very promising results. We've also begun a transfer equity study, which evolved out of the UW College's equity scorecard process, which revealed surprisingly low transfer rates for students of color. This is a collaborative study with the UW system, the Wisconsin Technical College system, and the Center for Urban Education at USC, which will study the transfer pathway for students of color. We have undertaken a climate study, as you heard at an earlier meeting. We have 5 campuses that have completed the study and are now developing action plans. Another 4 are on board to administer the survey in the fall. And we are actively engaged in the Compass project as a system with 3 of our institutions, UW Eau Claire, UW Oshkosh, and UW Milwaukee, in a tri-state collaborative project with AAC&U and 2 other large public university systems from other parts of the country. Together, we're going to be working on remapping general education and engaging underrepresented students in the high-impact practices that we know improve persistence and outcomes. In the area of access, we have a number of new opportunities that we believe will help us reach first-generation low-income and students of color. And we have some need-based financial aid strategies and programs designed to support retention and persistence to degree for first-generation students or underrepresented students of color, including the one that we discussed this morning, the hold harmless for tuition increases for Wisconsin families below the median state income. So that's kind of, we didn't wait for the end of Plan 2008 to begin to shift our focus to an approach that is more intentionally, more data-driven, and more accountable. So now we're looking at inclusive excellence. And this is a framework that we have chosen to help us move to the next generation, if you will, of diversity work for the UW system. And we've chosen this for a number of reasons. The first is because of the kind of engagement that it calls for. This inclusive excellence calls for widespread and all-encompassing engagement within each of the organizations that make up our systems. It basically says that the diversity agenda is everyone's responsibility, and it's one that we all need to take very seriously. We selected it because of the kind of change it aims to create, which is transformational, fundamental, and deep-seated. It places the mission of diversity at the center of institutional life as a core organizing principle, one around which all other institutional decisions are made. It emphasizes excellence and basically says you cannot have excellence without diversity, that the two are very deeply intertwined. It recognizes that all students are not the same. Our undergraduate students come from all walks of life. They have unique and different biographies, social identities, and life experiences. And as the faces of our students continue to change, so must the curricular and co-curricular approaches we use to ensure their growth as learners and as individuals. We have for different students, and we need to have different forms of support and guidance if they're going to reach their goals. We also were really cognizant of the fact that after conversations over the last year or two, it was really clear that the last thing we need is another 10-year plan. What we really need is something that helps us build on the work that we've already begun, to broaden the scope of the work to be more inclusive of other underserved, underrepresented populations, and as I said earlier, to drive this work into the fabric of everything that we're doing. Inclusive excellence explicitly expands the definition of diversity to include multiple dimensions of diversity and retain the focus on those with the most significant impact. So we're not abandoning the unfinished agenda of Plan 2008. That clearly needs to be part of what we focus on as we move forward. Over the past year, we've had ongoing discussions with chancellors and provosts. Last month, we held a statewide meeting with representatives from each campus, including students. All of these efforts will help us to define and shape the inclusive excellence framework for the UW system. And all of these people are key partners in the design and developmental phases of this work. We need to place this work at the center of our academic efforts, connecting diversity and equity to institutions' work toward quality and excellence. And we need to focus on implementation. We believe that the Inclusive Excellence Framework will enable institutional leadership to build on work that's already in progress, using existing data to establish new baselines against which to measure this progress, and to integrate these efforts into institutional priorities. Here's a graphic that we've created for our efforts in inclusive excellence. As you can see, that's at the center, surrounded by the things that are key to maximizing success for educational excellence and inclusion in all dimensions of campus life. So you see prominently faculty and staff, administrative leadership, and so on. I won't read the whole circle to you, but I think you can see, and this was in the board materials as well. This, as again, we're looking at this as a planning process designed to help institutions establish comprehensive, well-coordinated strategic actions with the intentional focus on fostering and supporting diversity and inclusion. The central premise is that universities and colleges have to intentionally integrate diversity efforts into their core operations and academic priorities, into their organizational leadership, into decision-making, into quality improvement initiatives, and into organizational culture. Let me give you a few working definitions, because some of these are important in the way we're shifting our view here. In terms of diversity, we're using a common language around which we're organizing this work and developing a set of operating principles. For diversity, we're looking at any human difference that can be engaged in the service of learning. This is consistent with past practices in the UW system, but the primary difference is in relationship to the past strategic plans, Plan 2008 and its precursor, Design for Diversity. They focused on race and ethnicity because of the persistent glaring inequities of outcome that we know are still present. What we're doing now is expanding the scope of the work and the full range of diversity we must leverage for personal, institutional, and cultural change. Another key principle is inclusion, which includes the active, intentional, ongoing engagement with diversity, which is at the heart of inclusive excellence. And it asks for inclusion to be present in the people we serve, in the curriculum, in the co-curriculum, and throughout our communities. A few more. The concept of equity-mindedness is one that you have heard before when we've talked about the equity scorecard. It refers to the development and internalization of mental models and practices that pay attention to the inequities in student outcomes. Racial inequities can be used as indicators of both personal responsibility and individual accountability for outcomes. And if in equity-mindedness you do not ascribe to the belief that the problems of the inequities are beyond the spheres of influence and control that we all have. Equity-minded actors do not utilize deficit-minded analytical perspectives. That is, we don't justify unequal outcomes and blame the students for those results. Thank you.
Like-minded.
Thank you. Thank you. And then excellence, I think I probably don't need to give you a definition of excellence. I think you all know what academic excellence means in the context of our institutions. But within this frame, what we are saying is to achieve excellence, we must be inclusive. We can't do one without the other. And if we're going to be inclusive, we have to be equitable. We have to pay attention to not only who's at the table, but what their outcome is, whether or not they graduate, whether or not they are able to participate in the high-impact programs, whether they make it into the majors that they wish to pursue. In your board materials, there was a chart that looked like this, that was the benefits of diversity. And you don't need to look at it now, but I would draw your attention to it maybe later, because I think we frequently refer to the benefits of diversity for students without describing the outcomes and the research that suggests what occurs for students and others. The table describes the many ways that experiences and active engagement with people with different perspectives, cultures, life and educational experiences, whether that's socioeconomic and class backgrounds, racial and ethnic identification, sexual orientation and gender identity, contribute to and positively impact learning for students and effectiveness across our society. And this in one place pulls together the research about this at the individual level, what the benefits are at the individual level, what they are at the institutional level, what they are from a private business perspective, and what they are from a societal perspective. And I think it makes the case very clearly for why we need to be engaged in this work. So as we move forward with inclusive excellence, we might want to ask the question, how will we know if we are successful? And I'll give you several ideas that we have identified. We believe we'll know that we're successful if we have equitable representation and greater compositional diversity among the students and in our workplaces. We'll be successful if we have no gaps in achievement, if we close the achievement gaps, both for retention and for graduation. We will be successful if there's equity in student outcomes in classes, courses of study, and other opportunities for students that are indices of excellence. And that means that if we have 20% of our student body are students of color, we should see 20% of our majors in biology, 20% of our enrollments in medical school, 20% of the people who graduate should reflect that. That would be an equitable outcome. And we would see improved campus climate and a strong sense of belonging for all of our campus's members. We would also see increased competency at the leadership level in faculty and staff and students in dealing in this multicultural environment. We'd see a transformation of our curriculum in a way that would incorporate and infuse these multicultural perspectives across the entire curriculum. We'd have a priorities and reward structure that would be aligned with these goals. And we would have institution-wide, departmental, and academic indicators of excellence and inclusion that we would track on a regular basis. Now, I know that this all probably sounds pretty abstract. And I would like to mention at this point that we are in the formative stages of this, and it's very important as we do this work that we engage our entire organization in developing this approach. And so while we need important leadership from the top, and we have that with President Riley, and I know we will have that with our chancellors, we also need to have development at the campus level for these plans and these efforts to be meaningful. Or else we'll be right back where we started, with great ideas here in Van Nuys at this table and not as much happening out there in the real world as we would like to see. So in order to give you just a sense of how this is beginning to be framed at the campus level, I've asked Chancellor Rick Wells to talk about what's going on at UW-Oshkosh. But before, I would just say that as we move forward with this, over the course of the next year or so, each institution will be developing their own approach to inclusive excellence, addressing the campus context and culture, focusing on the very specific challenges, because as you know, this issue takes different forms on different campuses, and building on their ongoing efforts. Chancellor.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'll try to be brief. I've got a little handout going around to give you some idea of what we're doing at Oshkosh. But I did want to start off and say that at our institutions, as we put in place our strategic and operational planning, for example, at Oshkosh, diversity and inclusiveness have been a major core component of that. For example, at our campus, we identified diversity and inclusivity in 2001 as one of our central set of core values. And on our campus, we use Plan 2008, plus the guiding core values, for example, to be integrated throughout our 7 key operational plans. So it's supposed to show up in the academic program plan, for example, in the HR plan, and of course in the enrollment management plan, giving those examples. We're, as you know, retiring, so to speak, Plan 2008. So all the campuses, including Oshkosh, have gone through a process to do, kind of an assessment of that plan, to determine, what worked and what we need to do more of in terms of what worked, what might not have worked, what we should probably discontinue doing, and starting to get some ideas of doing some new things as we move forward to inclusive excellence. So as we develop our inclusive excellence plan, there's one way of thinking about that, which should be hopefully refined and in its slick version, so to speak, sometime next fall. We also want to make sure that we're not waiting for the plan to be finished and that we continue moving forward in the here and now to do some things to better accomplish our goals around inclusivity and diversity. So we're using, as I said, the lessons learned from an assessment of Plan 2008. Our campus is involved in the climate study, in the equity scorecard study, and in the elite compass project as well. Obviously, in the climate study, as you know, you've seen the results from that. We already are learning things, and from our equity scorecard study. The LEAP Compass project has just really basically been launched, and we'll continue to learn more from that. If you take a look at the handout, this is a work in progress as we build the Inclusive Excellence Report, and we'll be meeting with Vicki Washington, I think, in April on our campus to help frame our plan in terms of the outline that Rebecca just shared with you. But I thought you might be interested to see some of the things that happened. When we did the climate study on campus, we planned ahead of time to make sure that it got discussed, understood, debated, and that we then charged every unit in the campus to send back by the end of January an action plan. And then basically there are 3 kinds of questions we asked each unit to determine. What can you do at the individual level that will improve the climate based upon the information that you've learned about in the study of the overview of the climate study results? What can your unit do? What would you recommend the institution do? So we wanted to make sure people started thinking about taking ownership of the climate in terms of actions. So if you look at this report that Pam Lassiter just provided for us, it's the first stab at analyzing some of the themes from the 30 or so feedback reports we received throughout the campus from all the colleges and the divisions and units and so on. And we also have our students are doing the same thing. We gave them until the end of February to do a similar task, so they'll be sending us a set of action initiatives they think are important for us to consider. So you can just take a quick look at this and you see some of the recommendations in bulleted form in terms of diversity definition, different things, the leadership role, changes to the curriculum, attracting and retaining faculty and staff of color, training programs, instructional academic staff issues. As you know, this is a very good and comprehensive climate study, and we had identified concerns about how our classified staff feel regarding their status and how they're treated on our particular campus. There's a set of things there related to recommendations around hate crimes and sexual assaults. I know we all saw some of that information. It was especially disturbing. Roles in the support of diversity, some set of actions there. Mechanisms to voice concern. Giving voice is extremely important, obviously, in terms of enhancing a warm and supportive climate. And then quality of life issues as well. So those are the kinds of things that we'll start moving on and also will be included as part of the strategies and the tactics in our inclusive excellence plan. On the back, just is a draft of which came out of this too, is the Social Justice Week on UW-Oshkosh's campus. And you can see some of the people that will be coming and be featured there. This is receiving a lot of attention, and we have a team working on this led by Pam Lassiter, our Director of Affirmative Action and Equity. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We also have a set of information and things that we're learning from the equity scorecard in terms of some of our gateway courses and the kinds of results of students receiving D's, F, and W's. That really points to a great need to do a lot more in terms of the faculty development and pedagogy in the classroom to know how to teach in an inclusive way. For example, in the climate study, you're starting to see results that kind of reinforce things that need to be done in terms of high-impact practices. A student talked about her experience in a particular class, and the professor said, okay, what we're going to do is get into groups of 3 teams to work on projects throughout the rest of the semester. They'll give you 5-10 minutes to do that, and the students all organized. This African-American young woman, and when it was all done, she was left standing by herself. And so those are the types of things that we all have to get better at in terms of being aware of to be more inclusive in our education and be more equitable. And then I guess I would finish by, basically saying in a lot of ways this whole inclusive excellence approach is a change in the mindset. It's a new mindset. And I like to use the phrase that it really does require us to take ownership of what we have control over improving and not worry so much about what's happening outside of us. We need to help K through 12 and so on and so forth, but we need to pay attention to what's right in front of us. So we need to move from what I like to call defensiveness when we get this kind of information to disappointment, which then will result in diversity and inclusivity realized. And so that's how we're trying to do things on the campus.
Thank you, Chancellor Wells. So what are our next steps? I want to give you a sense of what is coming. Over the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to continue the work that we've already begun. We're well underway in our discussions with a variety of constituencies. As I mentioned to you, this approach is going to be tailored to each of our campus and institutional contexts. We have a very important system-wide group with representatives from every campus, including students, that is going to help us shape the system framework, but the real work is going to go on, on the ground at the institutions. We also will be sharing this entire presentation with the President's Diversity Council in April and get their feedback on the issues as well. Following that, we're going to be making campus visits. We're going to be meeting with constituency groups. We're thinking about holding a statewide or perhaps several regional meetings where we will bring people together from the campuses, from the various constituent groups representing all of the major differences and dimensions of diversity that I mentioned earlier, to try to make sure that as these plans get developed, they fully reflect the full range of diversity that we are planning to be working on, and we plan to bring back to you a fully developed system-wide framework probably late next fall, so that we will then have a framework to guide our work going forward. So let me just summarize by saying that these are the core principles for the way we're approaching the diversity work under the frame of inclusive excellence. This is about the pursuit of equity and excellence. It's core to the mission. It pays very close attention to our students and where they come from and what their experiences are like. And it's based on a premise of widespread engagement in the process across our institutions. Here again is our tagline about, which maybe if you don't remember anything else, when you go home tonight, this is what I want you to remember. To achieve excellence, we must be inclusive, and to be inclusive, we must be equitable. So now it's your turn. We're sure that you will have many questions, and we're happy to try to answer some of them here, and others we may need to carry on in discussions at other times. But what we really would like is your perspective on not only these 3, but other policy issues that you will, I'm sure, want to put onto the table. But these are the 3 that we feel would be very helpful to us as we develop this work and move forward. What worked and what did not, and what are the most important lessons we've learned from Plan 2008? Where should the UW system expend its energies and resources in the years to come? And what type of leadership is required and expected from chancellors, from institutions, and from the UW system? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca, I would just point out before I open it up to questions, most of us were here in 2005 when we had that memorable meeting at the Pyle Center, and I think we felt at that time that we were taking a significant step, and it's good to hear you take us from the important decisions we made in 2005 and some of the successes that we've had since then. On the accountability piece, just from a board perspective, one of your, I think a bottom point on your accountability slide was the accountability of the chancellors for their commitment to inclusive excellence. I just want to mention that the board has also, in working out with President Riley, his goals as president of the system, it is in his annual goals also that he is held accountable for achieving that also, in addition to his colleagues. I'll open it up to questions of Rebecca or Vicki. Comments? Judy?
There's so many dimensions of this that I just want to make a couple of reactions of things that I'm interested in, and I have found this really very informational and challenging. But to some degree, at some point, I'd like to know, and if it's in this material and I didn't get it, please point it out to me. But the percentage of the Wisconsin population that is in each of these racial ethnic groups as compared to our university system population. I'm not sure I can tell that from that, but it seems to me that ultimately that's a relevant point as far as how we are serving this state of Wisconsin. Another thing that is interesting to me is, and of concern to me, is why do we think that the Native American or the American Indian statistics are flat? Why is that? The population that has been in this state longer than any other, I think that's something I'd like to know about. I looked at the charts that included gender, and that was very interesting. And it seems to me that we need to be asking questions about why there is disparity, and it's both ways, depending. And I think that that's important as we look at how we are attracting students and where that should be a concern anyway. And then the final thing that I've asked about before, and we've talked about before, is how poverty is connected with this. And it's not the same thing, because poverty is not something anybody embraces as in the same sense that one embraces the other parts of one's identity. But the way I try to explain this is, when I was on the Green Bay School Board in the 1970s, and we were a very homogeneous community, we had an achievement gap that we never talked about. It was poverty-based, and it was class-based, if you want to put it in other terms. I think that's not the same thing, and I'm not suggesting that's the same thing, but I do think it's useful to try to put those things together as to where the gaps are, and that will help us deal with that. And yet I'm not suggesting it be included in the same way, because it's not the same thing. It's a different factor, but it seems to me fundamentally important as we look at how we deal with these important issues in serving the state of Wisconsin.
Well, let me start with the first of your questions, because they get harder as you go down. So I'll start with the first, and then I'll see maybe Vicki has something to say. I don't have the numbers on the Wisconsin population for the state as a whole in the back of my mind. Sharon may. But I do know that the more relevant, in my mind, population statistics are about the high school graduate population of high school graduates. And I think I'm on firm ground to say that if you look at the younger you go in the Wisconsin population, probably the more diverse you're going to see the population. So it's not as important where we are today. It's where we're going to be in 5 years or 10 years that's important. But between 2001 and 2006, the percent of Wisconsin high school graduates of color increased from 11 to 15%. And as a system, we're not anywhere close to 15%. Such increases are expected to continue, and the projections for this group are that the percentage may increase to 18% in 2012 and 22% in 2019. So it's going to continue to increase, and then that's one of the reasons, not the only one, of course.
In different...
Yes, in different ways,
groups.
in different groups.
In different geographic regions.
Right. So I don't know about what to say about Native American students or what we know about that. And I don't know whether...
Well, the only other thing that might be relevant would be the service rate for students of color, which has been consistently lower than for white students. And the service rate is an indicator of how many students we enroll directly from high school. The Native American population is fairly small and hasn't really increased proportionately over time. So we could look to see if we could find more precise answers about why it stayed flat. But there wasn't anything that was evident in the numbers that we received in EDI. And I was looking at Sharon to see if she had anything, but I don't think we are aware. That's something we could find out, I'm pretty sure.
The service rate's on page 14.
Yeah, I think it's 28%. Right. Which is lower, and that's been something that we've reported on consistently over the past 3 or 4 years. So there is a gap there that could contribute to it, but we couldn't say definitively that that's the reason. Right.
The disparities in gender are, of course, complicated, and I think they're one of the aspects that the campuses that are engaged in the equity scorecard, for the most of those campuses are looking at those issues, and there are different things going on in different places, but it's the same kind of by looking specifically about what the data suggests along a number of different dimensions of student performance, we can begin to pull out what some of the issues are. The high school graduation rates by gender are also different, aren't they, Libby? Mm-hmm. And so we start
Yes, I understand.
from a position where we're not level to begin with. And then the last one was about poverty. And, I think we have to continue to look at these issues, and I think looking at the issues of need-based financial aid at first-generation students are ways that we can begin to address those issues.
But they also affect, I think that's a big issue that affects our success at the K-12 level, because many students are in schools that are just simply under-resourced for the level of preparation that we require. So that's why one of the growth agenda action steps is focused on collaborations with K-12.
Regent Vasquez, and then we'll go here first.
Thank you. I'm impressed with all the amount of data and information that we've gotten, and I think that the system is doing the best that it can do under many, many different and difficult circumstances. There's a couple of things that I would like to at least bring up for consideration. And looking at the key policy issues, what worked and what did not work, I really do think that that's very important, and in particular, what did not work. And by that, I'm hoping, and I'm sure you probably will do this, and that's to try to see if you can contact students themselves and ask them directly, how did you succeed in graduating? What happened while you were in college and the university that actually worked? And then, if there's any way possible, to contact those that didn't, and ask them, why didn't you graduate? What did not happen or could have happened that would have helped you? The uniqueness from my perspective, of university education is, in contrast to, say, vocational technical education, it's an either-or. either you have graduated or you didn't, and there's no in between.
Right.
I can't remember of too many instances where I've been where a lot of adults that did not graduate from university are talking very proudly of, I went to Madison for 5 years, but I didn't get my diploma.
Right.
Or I went to Yale, and I was there for 3 years, but I didn't get my
Right.
diploma. It very seldom happens. They talk more often than not on graduating. And so it's not the university education for me, it's not an issue of having been there, and isn't that wonderful?
Right.
And as I mentioned in one of my earlier meetings, as an employer, I don't care whether you were there 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The only question that matters to me, or the only answer is, did you graduate, yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
And thank you that you were there 10 years, but at least you graduated. That's the only thing as an employer that I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue that I'd like to have you consider, as an Hispanic, as a Mexican, one of the realities that I know that we will continue to experience for decades to come is that we will continue to be a minority among professional and successful groups. And it's a reality that I would hope that the university can play a very significant part in helping people of color. And that is, how do you feel comfortable? How do you swim in those waters? How do you become a leader within those environments?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I would encourage you to try to look at is, how do we take advantage of the diversity that's in the university climate, not to keep the students of color simply among themselves, and everything revolves around themselves. That's the easy part. What's going to make them even more successful is because in the environment that they're going to work in, and especially if they are successful and have graduated, they're not going to be around a lot of other people of color that are also graduates. They're going to be around a lot of people that are graduates of universities that are leaders, but don't happen to be people of color. And the worst thing that could happen for the university setting is to help them be successful and graduate, but it was all done within a cocoon setting, and then we let them out into the world that isn't that little cocoon environment. So I would encourage you to do whatever you can. Get them involved in leadership positions, in organizations. Get them out into the campuses, and not just stay within the Native American, within the African American, within the Hispanic population. There may be a need for some of that, but that should not be their whole sum total of their experience in the university environment.
Yeah, I would say, well, I think we can definitely address the first three points that you raised with regard to policy and practice. So with regard to the last one, it's not my experience that the students of color stay, it's virtually impossible, in fact, in majority white settings to do that. And the support that they get is the result of being in, that they need to have some affinity with people that have a shared and common experience. And so it is important to have that balance. But I think that the question around mentoring and development and to kind of help people understand the systems that they're in and how to be successful is an important one, and shouldn't be borne on the shoulders of our multicultural student organizations, which is kind of what ends up happening now. So that is a shared responsibility on the part of both the students and the institution. So we don't want that to happen either, right?
Thank you.
Regent Drew.
Yeah, I think it's particularly fitting that Chancellor Wells reported from Oshkosh, and I think it's clear that Oshkosh, under his leadership, has become a real leader in bringing diversity and inclusion into that campus. And the reason I say it's significant because of Oshkosh is a little over 40 years ago, 94 black students were expelled from Oshkosh basically, I think because they gave Oshkosh an F on an equity scorecard. And so I think it's an indication of how far we have come.
Right.
And obviously, we still have far to go, and we can't take our foot off the gas as we go forward. I thought it was an excellent report. I think the people that were involved in putting together the final report on Plan 2008, I think it was a frank and an honest report, and I just want to commend the people that put that together. Now, I wanted to focus on one area, and that's the pre-college programs. You know, and we're sort of looking at what worked and what didn't work, and it appeared where we did have some concentration on pre-college programs, they were successful. But then we also see that we only reached less than 6% of the students of color in K-12 with pre-college programs. So, you know, from my perspective, if we're, you know, trying to look at what worked, we need to put resources there. There were some institutions that had some very good results, like at Parkside. I think there's a strong program there. And the People program seems to be fairly successful for Madison. But I think we really need to concentrate resources there. And I think it really involves going into the classrooms and, you know, maybe using students of color to go into the classrooms. And, you know, I don't think we can, there's only so much we can expect people to come to us in terms of coming to summer programs or enrichment programs or responding to brochures. I think it's really important that we're in the classrooms, and especially in the urban centers, Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, Madison, in terms of being in those classrooms and bringing projects or the things that they're working on and kind of integrating that into the curriculum and making the connections with the teachers, because I think that is one of the really key things, is to make connections with the teachers and then, you know, build off of that. You know, there's in MPS, there's a lot of kids in a pretty demanding Project Lead the Way curriculum. 90% of them are students of color. I think we can, you know, try to find ways to, you know, hook up with our engineering programs with those kids. And I think we need to start early, even as early as middle school, in terms of connecting with those kids. So that would be it. And I guess my only question is, why the heck do we have to use Social Security numbers to track people in that program?
That's our only mechanism to know if those K-12 students go on to the higher education system. Right now, we don't have a K-16 data system that would allow an identifier to track them between K-12 and higher ed, but there's a lot of conversations going on to get there as there's a realization of a need.
Yeah, that's me.
Did you want to comment on that?
Sure. Senior Vice President Martin and I have been in a number of conversations around this, and what we do have, what we have developed in just the last few years in Wisconsin is a PK through 12 longitudinal student data system, which has given every student in the public system an individual student locator number. It is not Social Security. Yeah, it's called the ISIS program. And we did that. The only way we were able to create that, it's been quite an extensive process, as you can imagine, but it is in full operation now in Wisconsin, and the only way we were able to do it was that we did get a federal grant to do that. I'm happy to say that we have received another federal grant for that, and it is our intention to try to develop a PK through 16 to carry this through. So I think that will help our longitudinal in-program evaluation and accountability and assessment. So that's good news. The one other thing that I wanted to comment that I think Regent Drew has already addressed with the pre-college program, but really I think we can get we should seize this opportunity now in renewal of our commitment to excellence and being inclusive, would be for our schools of education to prioritize that they are actively going to go out and recruit individuals in teacher education and in K-12 administration, recruit individuals of color. Because for 8 years I've been traveling the state now, and it's not good. We do not have an educator. The educators of Wisconsin do not reflect the diversity of the student population. And so until we get schools that have faculties and administration that are reflective of their communities, I think we're going to find this very difficult. So I guess I would implore our schools of ed. We have a number of schools of ed who have just really rolled up their sleeves around this and are doing an excellent job. But if we could just as a system wrap ourselves around this, we really need it.
Right. You may recall that in the last biennium we had a growth agenda DIN to address this, and it was specifically focused on recruiting more students of color into the teacher preparation programs. We've had to hold up at the system level on filling some of the positions to make that work, and I know that each campus also was provided positions, and some of them have moved forward and some of them are waiting to see what's going to happen with the budget. It's one of the things, one of our high priorities, but we'll do the best we can.
So that's good policy. And another very good thing that this governor and legislature passed in the last budget was incentives to attract teachers to our highest need and our most diverse school districts to teach. So if we can just continue with all of our state policy really reflecting that this is really the issue. We don't have diversity in the adults who are working in the school districts.
Regent Davis.
Echo Regent Drew's commending of the authors and the worker bees, if you will, of this report, and also the work that's transpired so far in developing the framework called Inclusive Excellence. I think it clearly a lot of work, not just compiling data, but the thought. And so I do agree and commend those of you involved in that. I want to slightly disagree with Regent Drew, though, on the issue of pre-college. And this is because I have a very strong concern about whether goal number 2 is actually being met through the use of pre-college programs. Goal number 2 talks about an educational pipeline. And we can talk about the numbers of students in K-12 who go to pre-college programs, primarily middle school age and high school. And that's a wonderful thing. And I can think of a number of schools where this is a wonderful tool of introducing the whole idea of higher ed to students who otherwise would not have even considered it and wouldn't have a clue what that experience or how rich that experience can be for them. But the frustration that I do have, and in terms of what's not working, is this notion that the pre-college program is actually an effective tool, or that there's data to say that it is an effective tool for developing a pipeline. And I said to Rebecca when we talked prior to this meeting, I think I'm going to say something provocative like maybe we shouldn't fund pre-college programs. And then I said, well, okay, that's a little draconian. But it seems to be we got to figure out some ways to incent. I don't know whether it's going after federal money. I don't know what the answer is, but I think there's a real huge opportunity to string covenant pre-college and have it result in increased enrollment of students of color in our system or some higher ed system. And I just think that our progress to date is so minuscule, and being able to tell whether that's happening, I think we all suspect, given the little chart that goes from 80 to 7, that it's not happening the way I think it should. And that's not a condemnation on anyone. I just want to establish some urgency around this is a tool that could, perhaps, be a real, and for us to, for going forward, come up with some way to make that pipeline link. And so that's point 1. Point 2, and I know you want to respond, but anyway, is I think that this report, and I'm mindful of things that Chuck Pruitt, Vice President Pruitt has said many, many times. So, Chuck, I'm just letting you know I listened to you. This report, to me, makes crystal clear that we must fight to support the governor's initiative to keep, to have, and it was our idea, but I mean, the governor supporting us in holding harmless through the use of financial aid those who are the least among us, families with incomes of $60,000 or less. The report indicates that the national data says that college costs now represent 67% of low-income families' income, up from 49% 10 years ago. That is just a huge, big problem. And when you couple that, and you can tell I'm emotional about this because I just feel like there's something wrong with this picture from a public policy standpoint. You couple that with the fact that student debt has increased for the same population at significantly high rates. So you have, it's taking more of the family income, and these students are coming out with way more debt than anybody else. And I say that that's wrong. And I think we have to look at this and say, boy, let's do whatever we have to do to make sure that whatever changes come in this budget, it's not going to be that hold harmless part. Because I think we have to continue to have that as the priority that we have always indicated. So I just wanted to say that. And then my last thing is, I'm hoping that when we, at the end of the day, that we as a Board of Regents will not only accept this report unanimously, but that we will support enthusiastically proceeding forward with the inclusive, excellent framework. Insofar as one of the main things that I'm excited about is that it allows the institutions in a more holistic way. It encourages them to be a part of the solution instead of just having it determined for them. And then my last comment is to also agree with Regent Drew about Chancellor Wells. I am just enamored. Granted, it's my alma mater. But I am enamored with, since I've been on this board, his consistent leadership through discomforting times and progress on the issue of diversity and inclusion. He's the first one to step up and say, hey, look at my laundry, you know, and here's what we're doing about it. He's the one who's built it in, and I'm not saying to the exclusion of the rest of the chancellors. Please don't misunderstand me. I just think that he is a reflection to point 3 of the key policy issues of what we want in our leadership, those who will not waver. So I want to commend you, Chancellor Wells, for that.
Evaluating pre-college programs is among the top priorities of our office, and we really are beginning to think more concretely about how we can help pre-college directors do that. Our one hunch is that we don't have a real pipeline strategy and approach in some cases. The programs are not well connected. The students may have intermittent engagement at our institutions, and some of them are focused a lot on exposure and awareness and not necessarily the level of skill building and the type of continuity that is needed to build the pipeline. So we are aware of that, and I think that many of our pre-college directors are. I mean, one of the positive things about the Madison model, and I think what Future Phoenix is beginning to do, is to look at the question of pipeline and pre-college programs in a different way. So we hope to be able to have more data about the degree to which those programs are working or not, which can then help us understand how to best use our resources in those areas.
Regent Vasquez?
I'll start by saying this is Jose Vasquez speaking, not for anybody else, but as much as I sense a great sense of urgency for the increase in the numbers and not only entering but also completing, I realize that the situation that we find ourselves in with the relatively small number of people of color has not happened overnight. And I would be foolhardy to hope and wish and expect that the university can come up with a program that in 10 years is going to solve the problem, or even in 20 years. And so from my perspective, I would rather concentrate on under the excellence that we really bring in individuals that have the highest potential of succeeding and graduating rather than simply let's bring in lots of people so that we can say we are bringing lots of people into the university system. And the problem with that, and I'll be very upfront about it, is that if we do that and there are a great number of individuals that do not succeed, we will continue to get interesting letters that question. And as a Mexican, the thing that I will personalize it, that really bothers me is that those large numbers are then used to say this. See, it goes to prove my point. They can't make it. And look at all the money that's been spent, look at all the things that have been done, and look at the numbers that are on the floor that didn't make it. It just proves my point. They can't handle it. And I don't want the university system to be contributing to that kind of thinking out in the community that encourages people to see a large number of people of color that have come in and for no reason, no fault of their own, are not succeeding, and then become that opportunity for somebody to say, you see, I told you they can't make it in those universities, so why are we spending money? Why are they spending money? I really am cautioning us, let's not get overly consumed with we've got to have large numbers. I'd rather encourage us to think about let's have successful outcomes rather than just bringing in large numbers. Because I think we need to have a system that is modeling success and not just simply large numbers. The other thing also, let's also look at another potential pool of potential students. And again, I go back to, and many of you know this, one of my hearts is in the vocational technical system. I think we need to go to that system, and I look at Chancellor Wilson over there and others. There's a pool there of people of color that have succeeded, that have graduated, that have actually gotten the post-high school diplomas in their hands, hanging on their walls, and we're not looking at them. So I don't think the pool should only be looked at as the high school graduate or the recent high school graduate. I think we should go to those technical colleges and find out where are your graduates that somehow have proven that they can handle a post-high school education and be successful. Let's go after that pool that's already a ready-made talent pool that may even increase, with a little bit of help, our baccalaureate degree graduates that are people of color. So let's not just simply look at high school graduates or recent graduates, but maybe there's another pool.
Regent Vasquez, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that, we present the demographics around high school graduates because those are readily accessible to us, and they are our traditional population. But we are looking at the tech school graduates as well, and I think both Green Bay and Oshkosh have degree completion programs that are beginning to see larger numbers of people entering and moving towards their bachelor's completion. And the Wisconsin Transfer Equity Study that I mentioned is looking specifically at this, and we have as partners in this the tech college system. So we are working on specifically looking at students of color at ways to reduce the barriers for transfer and make those pathways more clear. I want to go back to your first point, though, about the numbers, because I think that I agree with you that we need to focus on student success. But I think that there's a trap about saying that we are not going to, that we will only, we really need to focus on the students who have the potential to be successful, because I'm well aware of the large number of students of color out there in our state that have the potential, but for one reason or another, we're not afforded the level of preparation or the family environment or the resources to be able to realize that potential. And I believe we have a commitment to those students as well. That means we need to think about our institutions differently. And we shouldn't be admitting students into our institutions that we are not dedicated to see succeed. But we need to be thinking about, what is it that they're encountering as they come into our institutions, and take responsibility at the institutional level for providing them with a successful experience. So I think there's, it's a double-edged thing, and we need to look at both sides of that.
And I would just add some examples. During the first cohort of the scorecard, we were admitting students that had comparable GPAs and test scores, and they're still leaving. And I think that former Chancellor at Madison used to say that a lot, that they look at their students and they're coming in with the same qualifications and they're still leaving. So in some cases, it could be what you're talking about. In other cases, there are other factors that influence. Some of these students are graduating in the top 10% of their class. They're graduating with honors from the school that they attended to come to us and to find out that they tested into developmental math. So the problems are not solely the problem of the student. And, it would be, in some ways, it's an unfair setup. It's an unfair setup to admit students if you think they're going to fail, and you admit them anyway. And it's an unfair setup to expect that students have to wait 50 more years to get access to post-secondary education when they're in certain educational settings where they don't control all of the factors that influence the quality of education that they receive at those institutions. And it's not to say that they don't have any responsibility in this. The last thing that any one of us wants to do is to do things that reinforce stereotypes. Because being a black woman, I understand what you're saying, and I also know that white students that fail are not labeled in the same way. So, it's both sides of the coin, and we need to be mindful of that as we react to things like letters from people in the public venue.
or they may be failing, or they may be leaving because of the environment
The climate.
we provide.
The climate. That's what I'm talking about as well. Right.
I want to allow the conversation to continue because I think it's very helpful. I'd also like to recognize a member of the state legislature who takes a great interest in this subject, being a representative from UW-Parkside, and that is Representative Corey Mason.
Great.
Would you welcome I appreciate your interest in this discussion, Representative Mason. I'd like to call upon Regent Burmester and then President Riley and then anybody else who has a question or comment.
Thank you. Well, I think getting back to the discussion around the pipeline and this opportunity, as Vicki, you were saying, of new models for pre-college or sort of, again, a new look at what is the best model for that pipeline. I guess I'd ask if you would work with us at the DPI. There may be potential through this federal stimulus Title I money, Title I, Title II, and IDEA, actually, that might be what we could come around. And then the second part of it is if the chancellors, a number of the chancellors in the system meet regularly with their superintendents of their region.
Right.
This would be something they could come together around because that relationship has to exist.
Right.
And I guess it's best if it's chaired by the chancellor. If the chancellor is the convener, as I've watched it, it's most effective if it's the chancellor who convenes it, brings these regional superintendents together. It's really regional PK-16 councils that were in the original design, 8-10 years ago. And if the chancellor has this in their evaluation, as it sounds we're doing, I'm just saying, let K-12 make them come to the table. Make them meet with you and convene, and that can be supported by DPI, and it can be supported by student achievement data that is readily available to everyone for those schools in your area, and maybe we can use some federal stimulus money to develop new models.
Thank you. Thank you. That would be great.
President Riley?
Let me connect the first key policy issue or question, which is really what it is, what worked and what did not work, to the financial aid question. I'm going to ask Senior Vice President Martin to comment on this in a minute, but we're all working very hard on the need-based financial aid issue. Institutions raising more money privately for need-based financial aid. The infusion of new financial aid that we talked about earlier in the budget discussion, up to the 16,000 hold harmless limit in the governor's proposal, a new increase in the Pell Grants that has happily come forward. But we've always assumed, we tend to assume a lot in this area. We've always assumed that's good, and I think that's a fair assumption, but we really haven't gotten down to where we study the effects of financial aid on students' progress through our system. And Rebecca is now, I guess, a principal investigator with some colleagues on the Madison campus who are using the mortgage money, the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, to begin a longitudinal study of students around success, retention, progress, connected to the amount of financial aid they do or don't have. And I just wanted to give her, it's a fascinating project, an opportunity to say a few words about it.
These are two colleagues in the College of Education and WISCAPE on the Madison campus who are looking at the first two cohorts, the first 2 years of Wisconsin Scholars recipients, and they're comparing the experience of those students with other students who would have been eligible. The eligibility pool for those funds were all Pell recipients, and the people who got the funding were selected on a random basis, so we could really do a true comparison between the two. They're looking at course-taking patterns, decisions that students are making about other financial issues in their lives. They're looking at their experiences to try to see if we can measure the impact of those additional funds coming from the mortgage gift on their lives. And this is the first study of this nature. I think they're actually going to look out 10 years so that we can be looking at real persistence, graduation rates, first employment choices, and really try to measure that impact. This is the first study of this nature that's been taken place that's as large as this one in the country. So.
I should say, since she's in the room, we worked with then Dean of Education on the Madison campus, now Interim Provost Julie Underwood, to put this together. So we thank her for her help with this.
Regent Pruitt?
I just a curiosity question. What's the size of the grant over and above the Pell Grant that the scholars are receiving? In other words, do you know?
Sharon knows.
For 4-year students attending 4-year institutions, and $1,800 for students who are attending 2 years.
$3,500 a year or a semester? A year. Thanks.
Thank you. On behalf of the students of the University of Wisconsin system, I would like to express that this is a very important discussion to be having. I'm encouraged by the structure of the conversation as we're moving forward, and commend you for your work. Thank you very much. There's a lot of conversations that I've been engaged with during my time on campus about how we should proceed with these discussions, and there's no consensus by any means. So this is, it's really a hard conversation, but it's going to be increasingly more important. I think that's evident in the work we do. First, I'd like to say that I sort of break this conversation down with people in a couple of different ways. One is talking about the people who are in our institutions. And I have a pretty firm belief that government and institutions like ours should work to privilege people equally. And one of the functions, I think, of this education system is to help people achieve the American dream and give people that chance to achieve the American dream. And so the pipeline programs and that access is very important. But I also think that one of the conversations, which is perhaps harder to have, and which is really on the cutting edge of our work, is the question of what sort of a climate people are coming into. And this isn't just about minorities coming in or people of color coming in or any number of different identity groups and their experience on campus. It is, I think, about how every single student in our system reacts to the changing world around them and is able to function with people who are different than themselves. And I think it's really important that we not only continue to frame conversations the way we have been around certain individuals, but that we also engage a conversation which is broader and perhaps more approachable for the majority of our students.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Rebecca's looking at me because I did tell her I was going to, I mentioned a little earlier if we could, I don't know if it's a motion or what, but I think having a record that says that we agree to proceed with the inclusive excellence framework would be good to have on the record. I don't know what that needs to look like, President Bradley, but...
I'll second that.
Okay, great!
Whatever it is. You didn't know what it was, and she said
It's how people get in trouble.
Perhaps, Judy, would it be appropriate if the record showed that we unanimously endorsed this direction that has been described to us this afternoon? And our wordsmith will take care of that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? If not, we'll take a break and resume at 3:15.
good time with that gavel today.
Betty, you know, just
Maybe
if I waited until things quieted down, we would start till 4.
Betty.
Well, I suppose you wonder why I've gathered you all here. Good. I was just waiting. I was about to introduce President Riley, but he was otherwise occupied. So, well, this is, I think, by far the most enjoyable and rewarding part of the day, because we are now going to do something that is, I think, historic in our move ahead in the whole diversity area. And I would call upon President Riley to take over from here.
Well, thank you, President Bradley, and I think it's very nice that after the very good discussion we had on equity, diversity, and inclusion, we're able to present these diversity awards. Kind of shows we're putting our money where our mouth is, I hope. We have individuals and categorical awards, 3 different awards. One is an individual category award, another a team category award, and a third one an institutional and unit category award. And they're all more than deserving. And we had a group of dedicated regents who worked to decide who indeed the awardees would be. That group was chaired by Regent Vasquez, and I want to turn it over to him to talk about the decisions that they made. Regent Vasquez.
Good afternoon, everyone. And since this is diversity, muy buenas tardes a todos. On behalf of my fellow Regents, I would like to welcome you to today's presentation of the Regents Diversity Award. I extend a special welcome to this year's award recipients and their families, friends, and colleagues who have joined them here this afternoon. We are very glad to have you with us. This is a historic day. For the first time in UW history, we gather to formally recognize the outstanding contributions that have been made in the name of diversity, an ideal that we have pursued for the last 20 years. What makes today's presentations even more special is that it marks the very first time we are publicly honoring individuals for their work in creating a diverse and genuinely multicultural system. As many of you know, the Regents sponsor 2 other award programs. One focuses on rewarding outstanding teaching. The other focused on rewarding exceptional service to the university of non-instructional, administrative, and professional academic staff. As we heard earlier today, the Regents Diversity Award Program has been established in response to a board directive to formally recognize and support individuals, teams, or collaborations and or units, organizations, or institutions in the UW system that foster access and success for historically underrepresented populations. And rightly so. I think all of us gathered here today can appreciate how important diversity plans like Plan 2008 are to an organization. They provide a sense of direction and a basis for making choices or decisions, among other things. But such plans have no real meaning or impact without people who breathe life into them to make them come alive. Without the hand that touches them, the plans are only words on page. After meeting our award recipients, I am certain you will understand exactly what I mean. We are honoring 4 award recipients this afternoon according to the categories of individual, team, and institution. Each of our recipients uses a different approach in their diversity work, yet their efforts do resemble each other in several key respects. In their work, you will find a genuine respect for human differences, a deep attentiveness to the learning process, and a keen responsiveness to students and their educational needs. This year's selection committee included Regents Davis, Womack, and up north. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow regents for the time and effort they put forth, carefully reading and evaluating over 25 portfolio submissions that we received on behalf of 13 UW institutions. The selection process was far from easy. There were many high-caliber individuals, teams, and institutional programs that were submitted for consideration this year. Yet we could choose only one submission per award category. Let me share a few last notes before we present the awards. We have distributed profiles of each of our award winners, which are in the portfolios that we have received. And the folders also include brief descriptions of other award finalists. I encourage each one of you to read them. In terms of the award ceremony itself, Regents Davis, Womack, and I will take turns to introduce each of the winners. And it is my honor to be the first one to do that. So please let me, at this point, start the actual award ceremony. I am delighted to present the 2009 Board of Regents Diversity Award in the individual category to Ms. Roseanne Mason, Director of Community Dialogues at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. Ms. Mason is an extraordinary model for those who grapple with the question of how to live out the commitment to diversity in ways that are genuine, authentic, and integral to the life one actually leads. Particularly as a professional, and integral to the life one actually leads, particularly as a professional in the fields of higher education. One look at her vita, and it becomes clear rather quickly. For Roseanne Mason, diversity is more than a professional responsibility or a job. It is a way of life, a commitment that she lives day in and day out, as fully as possible, whenever or wherever she can. How do I know these things? Well, I'm going to tell you. First, there is the multifaceted and inclusive nature of the work in which Ms. Mason regularly engages. UW Parkside's Community Dialogues Office has as its mission to foster understanding, action, and change through community dialogue. In addition to directing the daily activities associated with the Community Dialogue Office, Ms. Mason has designed and taught courses on topics such as white privilege, white allyship, and multicultural writing. She has developed an anti-racism curriculum and has facilitated summer faculty workshops to infusing race into the curriculum. As varied and stimulating as the work appears, I'm certain none of it is very easy. According to her colleague, Thomas Scheinbolt, Dean for Community Engagement and Civic Learning at UW Parkside, there are few forms of work that are as emotionally tolling with so few visible benchmark indicators of success. There is also the collaborative and all-encompassing scope of her work to consider. Ms. Mason's efforts extend well beyond the confines of the UW Parkside campus. Perhaps the best example I can provide is the work that she has done with her Diversity Circle program, a program that encourages its participants to look inward and consider how their perspectives and assumptions about differing social identities impact their ability to develop rich human relationships. In addition to regularly taking place on Parkside's campus, thanks to Ms. Mason's leadership, diversity circles now also occur at nearby local high schools, in the communities of Kenosha and Racine, and at the local prisons in the region, across the state, across the system institutions, and even in Midwestern states like Michigan and Illinois. You're all over the place, aren't you? In each of these locales is a core of facilitators that she has empowered and trained to carry the work forward. Most recently, Ms. Mason was awarded a grant from UW System's Institute on Race and Ethnicity to train a cadre of 12 facilitators to conduct 48 additional diversity circles on racism, gender, poverty, and sexual orientation. But the most significant testament to Roseanne Mason's deep and intensive commitment to diversity can be found in the longevity of her professional career. Are you ready to tell them? She has spent more than 20 years working on issues related to diversity, nearly all of them at UW Parkside. According to another Parkside colleague, her long-standing tenure and the compassionate manner she exhibits towards students and peers has earned her the reputation as the gentle matriarch, whom everyone turns to for guidance, comfort, and strength. Let me finish this short tribute by quoting what Professor Faye Yokomiso Akinse, Director of the Center of Ethnic Studies at UW Parkside, wrote about Ms. Roseanne. Our first Regents Diversity Award winner. As a teacher and community activist, Roseanne Mason models what it means to be an engaged U.S. and university citizen. She exemplifies the white ally working in partnership with people of color for change that is inclusive and liberating. The lives of UW Parkside, students, faculty, and the administrators in the community are richer, safer, and definitely more hopeful because of Roseanne Mason. So please, let me congratulate you, and I present the award winner, Ms. Roseanne Mason.
Thank you, everybody. I want to start by inviting you all to join a diversity circle. It's often been my wish to come right up into this room. It only takes 2 hours, 5 weeks in a row, and we could get through one, and I think you would enjoy it. So I want to thank you for the honor of being the recipient of the 2009 Regents Diversity Award. I want to thank the Board of Regents. I want to thank Tom Schnobelt, my supervisor, who was so kind to nominate me for this award. He couldn't be here today because tomorrow is his last day on campus before he moves on to Stanford. Also, I want to thank my colleagues who wrote wonderful letters of support. Jose quoted from some of them. Also, the selection committee for their work in making the decision among many worthy candidates. I want to thank the other candidates who were nominated for this award, whose work should also be recognized. And finally, I want to thank the many people at Parkside and Kenosha and Racine and all over the state who do this work. I accept this honor as their representative. I want to welcome some family who came with me today and some friends and colleagues. My life partner, Corey Mason, is here. My son, Representative Corey Mason, is here. My daughter, Alexandria, is here. And my granddaughter, my daughter, Rosemary, and my granddaughter, Alexandria. So, Alexandria, could you come up here for a minute? Okay. Alexandria last night was helping with my speech, and we have a little pebble that we want to give to all of you at the reception. So I know we're on a schedule here, but at the reception she's going to pass one out to you, and I'll explain that later. Thanks, sweetie. Okay. Also in attendance is my two colleagues, Margaret and Shannon, and they were up here for a conference today and ran over at the end so that they could spend the time here with me, and I appreciate that. And also, well, someone else was coming, but he's not here yet. So as a facilitator for the UW Extension College's Multicultural Awareness Program, I've learned that there are 4 levels of awareness and understanding about diversity. There's the personal and interpersonal, and the institutional and the cultural. At the personal and interpersonal level, I have been blessed with a career of pursuing my passion for the possibility of creating a multicultural society. I so appreciate the many opportunities that have been provided to me to pursue that dream. However, even though I am being awarded in the individual category, I want to emphasize to you, the Board of Regents, the importance of the institutional support I have had over the past 22 years. At the institutional level, you, the Board of Regents, have had the vision to implement various initiatives to promote creating a more holistic and affirming organization. From 1988 to 1998, the Design for Diversity initiative was implemented. While teaching pre-college level English, I and a Latina colleague developed a cross-cultural reading and writing course to create a more multicultural campus climate. As the equity scorecard has since shown, campus climate is critical to student retention. From 1998 to 2008, Plan 2008 initiative was implemented, and I know you spent the day talking about Plan 2008. There are many initiatives that we were able to start because of you. Jose mentioned the diversity circles, and Rebecca Martin, who you all know, when she was provost at Parkside, started the Student Support Initiative, and through that initiative, I was able to work with our Evaluation Research Center, where student researchers are evaluating the impact of diversity circles on student retention. Jose also mentioned the Summer Institute on diffusing diversity into the curriculum. That was an idea that started with our Office of Equity and Diversity, Eugene Fujimoto, and we're getting ready to do our third Summer Institute this summer. UW Extension, UW College's Diversity and Equity Council, where I first met Vicki Washington. I don't know where Vicki is. Vicki heard about diversity circles somehow and brought the council down to Parkside and invited me to be on the council. I spent many years on that council, and on that council, I watched Vicki work tirelessly to make sure the Multicultural Awareness Program was initiated, and we have had over 1,000 participants, almost 1,000 participants in that program. And also, I guess I have to call you president now, right, Kevin?
No.
Okay. And Kevin was also very supportive of that initiative. I also want to mention the many, many grants, the Institute on Race and Ethnicity, the Diversity Program Development Initiative, the Program and Innovation Grants. All of these have helped make it possible to spread diversity circles on a statewide level. The Ethnic Studies course, Understanding White Privilege, that I teach with the director of our center, Faya Kindes, who was very, very helpful in making that happen, for the purpose of creating allies across our campus. I know this award is about students, and I want to just talk briefly about two students. Damian Evans, who's the director of our Office of Multicultural Student Affairs, was a student in my cross-cultural reading and writing class in the early 90s. And now Damian is teaching the Understanding White Privilege class with me. Damian is African American, and so in fact, he had to take class today because I was on my way up here. And so I'm just thinking about the impact of the efforts that you put forth back in 1988 and how they're playing out today. The other student I want to tell you about is Crystal Perez. Crystal was a student in the first Understanding White Privilege class that I taught, and as you might tell from her name, she's a Latina. And she claims that in that course, she realized that she needed to learn more about her heritage. And as we speak, she is in Costa Rica spending the semester learning to speak Spanish more fluently. So the next phase, as you all know, is inclusive excellence, which broadens the scope of diversity from more than just having different people as part of the organization to creating a truly multicultural institution where we work together to recognize, understand, and appreciate differences. As indicated by the results of the Equity Scorecard, however, we cannot allow this new, more inclusive endeavor to dilute the anti-racism work that we have already done. Broadening the scope will allow us to continue the tradition of changing not only our system, but our culture. So I'm grateful to you, Board of Regents, for this recognition of my personal passion for what is possible. I am even more grateful for the courage you have shown in making the work possible on a deeper institutional level. Historically, in difficult economic times, diversity initiatives have been the first to be cut. I applaud you for your courage in these most difficult economic times to provide these opportunities across the system. Because of you, we have the opportunity to be allies as we work together toward the common goal of inclusion and excellence. I just wanted to talk about a program that wasn't mentioned. There's a group in Racine and Kenosha who do what is called Peace Learning Circles at our elementary school level. And at the end of their Peace Learning Circles, they pass out little pebbles to remind people that we're all responsible for making peace. And so make sure that you get a pebble from Alexandria at the reception. Thank you very much.
And now, Regent Womack.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just take a moment to thank Dr. Martin and Dr. Washington and the staff for their efforts in our previous setting and the report and the mentoring and the monitoring that they did in that process. I'd like to also thank the chancellors for their efforts. I understand that this is very difficult to do, and I just want you to stay the course. If you recall seeing the DVD on Bill Gates did a DVD on February 9th, and it's called TED, T-E-D, and it talks about world problems. If you haven't seen it, just go online and put it in, and it's about 17 minutes, and I think that you will be inspired by it. Mr. Gates made a few statements that I think are extremely fitting for what we just heard and what we're hearing right now. And these are some of the things he said, and these indeed are my sentiments as well. We should always be able to look at our education system and look at what's going well and what isn't. That's what progress is all about. The next thing he said is that our education system is the one thing that we need to get right. We have to get that right. And the third thing he said was, I'm optimistic. And those, in fact, are my sentiments to you regarding what we heard a few minutes ago and what we're doing right now. I am optimistic. And I'm happy that we're talking about race. And I'm happy that we're talking about ethnicity. And somebody just needs to call Eric Holder and tell him that we do talk about things like that. It is my distinct honor to present the 2009 Board of Regents Diversity Awards for the teen category to Drs. Rebecca Adler, Assistant Professor of Biological Science at UW Manitowoc, and Dr. Katrina Carlston, Associate Professor of Biology at UW Stout. Rebecca and Katrina are the main architects of an innovative and exciting collaboration between UW Manitowoc and UW Stout aimed at increasing the number of students of color who participated in STEM, which is the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math initiative in related research. What makes Portals for Discovery, which is what this program is called, so deserving of the award? Number one, it provides strong, rigorous academic preparation for its young students of color, the same kind of science and mathematics-based skill building that they have long sought after and has also been a part of the pre-college programming. Students engaged in STEM-related research began in high school and continue their research at the 2-year and 4-year levels if they choose to do so. During that time in the project, the students develop a high laboratory and research skills. They also develop the skill in collecting data, creating databases, documenting records, writing reports, and other things. Number two, the program is very attentive to the mentoring and social networking needs of these participants. And if anybody thinks at this time that 19, 20, and 21-year-olds don't know about social networking, when students make the transition from high school to the university, they're able to tap into the same research teams as they were previously. This means that they're not only ready with their network of friends, but they're also with familiar professors doing the same kinds of research, and they're quite comfortable at doing it. As the research has shown, faculty support is absolutely critical in persistent and in educational achievement, especially for students of color. At this point, you're probably thinking that Portals of Discovery sounds quite similar to the pre-college programming. It's a little different. Perhaps the biggest point of departure is the close attentiveness of the program plays to culture and cultural identity. The main research project for this Portals of Discovery program undertakes a focus on medicinal plant use by Hmong people in the state of Wisconsin. Portal participants essentially engage in scientific research that is culturally based and relates to one of the state's fastest growing ethnic populations. For young Hmong students, the program provides them with an opportunity to explore their heritage from an entirely different perspective. For other students of color who are participating in the program, they learn about the culture. For the faculty and the lab assistants, they also have an opportunity to learn about the culture, the people, and the traditions that may be more wholly unfamiliar to them as an integral part of scientific research. It is science and cultural bridge building at the same time. This is an innovative approach to the learning and teaching of STEM that we have not seen before. What makes the Portals program even more compelling is that Drs. Adler and Carlson have devised it specifically so that it is low cost, flexible, and entirely replicable at any UW 2-year or 4-year institution. In fact, they presented the Portals program as a model in the 2008 spring meeting of the UW Women in Science program. I'm very excited about this program, but I'm not the only one. I'll close my remarks with a quote from Brooke Koenig, one of the students who participated in the program as UW Manitowoc student and is currently attending UW Stout. Her words, "I was delighted to have the opportunity to conduct research while at UW Manitowoc and now continuing that work as I move to UW Stout. I've come to realize how important this collaborative research actually is. I believe this kind of experiences give students at 2-year campuses an opportunity to participate in experiences that they might not otherwise get as they transfer." Please join me in congratulating Dr. Rebecca Adler, Assistant Professor of Biological Sciences at UW Manitowoc, and Dr. Katrina Carlson, Associate Professor of Biology at UW Stout. Congratulations, ladies.
Well, thank you very much. I believe that I can speak for both Katrina and myself when I say we are honored, humbled, overwhelmed, and so grateful for this recognition at this very early stage of our project. Of course, we have many, many people to thank, and I'm going to let Katrina thank some people personally and not speak for her, but of course we thank first and foremost the Board of Regents for recognizing us, the selection committee for choosing our project out of the many, many worthy projects, and our institutions. And personally, I would like to thank Chancellor Wilson's office Provost Lampe, who I see here today, who has been so very supportive and just very encouraging. I'd like to thank the Dean of UW-Manitowoc, Dr. Daniel Campagna, who has always encouraged me to look for new directions, has never once said, no, I don't think we can do that, and who has always been very, very supportive of new and innovative programs at UW-Manitowoc. We've been hearing, and I don't think it's any secret to say that these are tough times, and they're tough times for everybody in the state of Wisconsin. And that's why I am so very proud and honored to be a part of this institution. Katrina and I are both alumna of the University of Wisconsin system. I attended UW-Oshkosh. Katrina graduated from UW-Stevens Point. And so we always have known about the Wisconsin idea. And it's times like these when I really just take comfort in the fact that the Wisconsin idea, that we are going to make the lives of any Wisconsin resident better lives and expand opportunities for all of our residents, is alive and strong in this room, in our system. I'm just so excited about that, and I think that's really the driving force that has had Katrina and I push forth with this project and continue to hope to expand it across the system. We really do believe in that, and we really do believe in reaching out to these underrepresented populations and helping them find their piece of the puzzle, make their lives and their opportunities better. So we are just so excited to do that through the Portals of Discovery program. You heard we've had one student, this is a very, very beginning stage of the project, one student, Brooke Koenig, moved through and is at UW-Stout. And we have other students working on the project as well. And one thing that I think is so neat is a student of mine right now, a sophomore at UW-Manitowoc, Kia Tao, who is a pre-nursing student right now and wants to work with the Hmong community. She's a Hmong student. And what was so fun for me was the reason why she wanted to work on the research project when she heard about was, my mom's always telling me to eat this weed that's in our yard when I have a stomach ache, and I want to know what that is. And so talk about really making those cultural bridges and really having that personal approach. It's been so neat, not just for me, but the other students involved in the project, the other professors, to see those things. And Kia brings in plants from her grandmother's garden for us to work on. And how rewarding is that? It's really, really been very, very exciting. So I'm going to let Katrina say a few words, but again, thank you to everybody who's been instrumental in this project, from the students to the Board of Regents. We are thrilled. I would just like to echo really everything that Dr. Adler has said. Again, thank you to the Board of Regents. It's an overwhelming honor. I think when Becky and I found out, we used the word giddy. We just literally could not believe that we had been selected for such an overwhelming honor. And I'd also like to thank Becky, my collaborator, for really being a can-do person. And both of us think big, and we think big about this project. We think not just system-wide, but nationwide. We think this model has that kind of potential, and that's where we'd like to see this go. I'd like to thank all the people I've worked with at UW-Stout, Provost Perspoe, the Chancellor. Your support and encouragement has just been extremely, I'll use the word overwhelming again, because that's all that comes to mind. I appreciate it. And I also have to thank my husband, who really puts up with a lot. So, oh, and I have to thank Becky's husband too. We promised each other we would thank our husbands, because they really, we both have small kids, and both of our husbands know how dedicated we are to this project, and they've really given us the time to do what we need to do. Like 2 o'clock in the morning, taking care of kids for us so we can work on stuff. So thank you very much. We're sincerely honored.
I'm very pleased to present the final award in the Institution Unit category to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville for its Master of Science in Adult Education in Distance program, represented here today by Professor Patricia Bromley, who coordinates the program. This is an extraordinary initiative, one that models the kind of responsiveness to student needs that we have come to expect from all of our UW institutions, and that we need to see more of, quite frankly. Its efficacy is evident in a number of ways. Allow me to tell you a few of those. By design, the Master of Science in Adult Education has intentionally reached out to underrepresented students since 1995. This off-campus graduate program has been highly successful in addressing the challenges that first-generation college graduates have experienced historically in pursuing graduate education while maintaining full-time employment, especially in the areas of human services and education. The program awarded degrees to its first graduating class in 1997. These degrees were largely in the form of certificates and licenses that post-baccalaureate holders required in their jobs as human service workers. A second concentration, vocational technical education, was added in 1998 and currently serves 125 students. The program offers flexible formatting and scheduling, including a 2-year rotating cycle of its courses so that students can enter the program when the time is right for them and complete their degree requirements following the rotation. Classes are offered in Milwaukee, Racine, Beloit, and Madison at MATC. Most of the Milwaukee and Racine students are employed by human service agencies pursuing the human service concentration in order to be able to make a greater impact on their communities as well as to advance their own careers. Recruiting is mostly through word of mouth, the best kind. Several graduates of color are now recruiters for the program. Current students bring into the program coworkers, members of their churches, and family members. Faculty who teach in this program typically teach on campus as well. They travel to sites to teach over interactive TV. Students often describe faculty as flexible, accessible, and committed to their educational success. Survey and focus group comments consistently praise the program's diversity of race, socioeconomic status, age, geographic region, profession, faculty, and in the ideas that are presented. How diverse is it, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. It is UW-Platteville's Students of Color Serving Program. In 2007-08, 40% of the program's registrations were for African American and 9% for Hispanic and Latino students. Did you all hear that? 40%, 9. We hear a lot about the need to reach a critical mass of underrepresented students of color at our UW institutions. Is 40% of students enrolled in a degree program at UW-Platteville or at any UW institution a critical mass? You betcha. Our discussions throughout, I like that better, by the way. You know, you betcha. Our discussions throughout the day have been focused on the three pillars of UW System's growth agenda: people, jobs, and communities. UW-Platteville's Master of Science in Adult Education is a program that epitomizes commitment and service to each of these pillars. The numbers I quoted above provide one kind of confirmation of the program's impact. But as Regent Vasquez noted at the start of today's awards presentation, it's the human touch, the people who make the program come alive, who truly embody its power of transformation. The program students recognize this and deeply appreciate the attention and understanding the program and its faculty provide. As one student stated, quote, "In undergrad, I was the only minority. Nobody knew where I was coming from. Here, they do. And this program makes me feel valued and important," unquote. Please join me in congratulating the University of Wisconsin-Platteville for this outstanding program and the program coordinator, Professor Patricia Bromley.
After that was such a wonderful introduction. My. First of all, thank you so much. We at UW-Platteville are just thrilled to be receiving this award from you, and thank you for the will that you have, the inspiration that you have for creating the award program, and for presenting it to us. I coordinate a distance program, as Renee mentioned, that extends across southern Wisconsin. We do have students in 2 concentrations, in human services concentration, and also we serve technical college faculty who need to take certification classes for the WCTS certification system. And they can use that and apply it toward a master's degree through UW-Platteville. One of the advantages of having those 2 concentrations is that we have people, for instance, a Milwaukee class of MATC faculty primarily, in one of our core classes, maybe 5 or 6 people, and over interactive television, they're linked up with a group of perhaps 8 or 9 human services workers from the inner city. Most of our Milwaukee and Racine students live in the inner city areas of those cities, and it's just an incredible synergy that happens when the discussions get going in those classes. It's just unbelievable. We never have trouble getting faculty to teach the classes. You would think there might be. Interactive television does add a certain level of complexity to the instruction. But what they say is, of course I'll do it. I love the students. I want to do this. I love the discussions. I learn so much. I take things back to campus, and it's invaluable. So we're very, very happy to be creating that kind of learning experiences, not just for the students, but also for our faculty who come and teach the classes. According to the focus groups that we conduct, the program is diverse in just about every way you can imagine. Because of that interactive television mode of delivery, we are able to reach students in different geographical areas in the state. They're diverse in race, they're diverse in socioeconomic status, and diverse in occupation. Students report that the instructors are diverse as well in professional training, in philosophical orientation, and in the ideas presented. Students gravitate to our program because it's user-friendly. It comes to them. We use technology in an appropriate way that's doable by the students. We try not to put barriers in people's way and try to make it as personal a program and as individually a tailored program for them as we can. In the words of one of our Milwaukee students, a lot of us have a fear to learn. And we didn't grow up in households where we were told we could learn. Here, you know you can compete, you know you can learn. So they have that kind of sense of camaraderie. We can do it. We can create something for ourselves and for our society. This program would not exist were it not for the skill, diligence, and creativity, and I'm going to mention some names here, so maybe they would raise their hands when I mention their names, of Marion Mache-Heiner, Director of the Office of Continuing Education at UW-Platteville, who devised the program, and with the School of Education and professors and partners across the campus, but also across the state, got it off the ground. But it would not have experienced continued success without the support of Chancellor Markey and Provost Butts, Dean David Van Buren, Dean Mitty Nimitz, and the faculty and staff. I especially want to recognize Mr. Troy Cobb, who is a member of our first cohort of graduates from 1997. He is our Racine Recruitment and Retention Specialist, and he is a major key to our success. I also want to recognize two of our on-campus students. This is mostly a distance program, but we do have some on-campus students. Rashawn Dunn and Carl Wesley are with us today, too, from the program, working on their master's degrees. All of us feel privileged to be working together with this diverse group of students. We thank our students for enriching our understanding, and we thank you for this wonderful honor. Thanks so much.
President Bradley, that concludes our award ceremony.
Well, thank you very much. And I was going to include Regent Davis, but she's busy.
Got it in a minute.
Okay. I just want to mention, from my standpoint, Danae and Jose and Betty were willing to do this, and I know it takes a lot of work. It's very rewarding, but whenever the president asks somebody on the board to pitch in and help, it's always a yes, and that is always very much appreciated. And Kevin also. I'm sorry, Kevin, I forgot that you were part of the group also.
Yes, he did.
Who also said yes, enthusiastically. Yeah. So thanks very much, and job well done. I'll now entertain a motion by Vice President Pruitt for us to adjourn to recess to closed session.
Mr. President, I move that we move into closed session to consider authorization to recruit a faculty member at UW-Madison as permitted by Wisconsin statutes.